And this is different than anything, any clinic around.
Workouts that are tailored for her, and that really makes a difference.
Really personal. I've gotten way more mobile, stronger, flexible. Just everything just improves me to the next level.
Welcome to the On Cue Performance Therapy Podcast, where we push sports performance and physical therapy to its apex. We change the game by bringing together the brightest minds in the field to offer best practices and question how things are done today. I'm your host, Mike Quintans, physical therapist and expert in sports orthopedics. I'm living my dream and opened a clinic that unites all elements of sports medicine under one roof to drive recovery and performance outcomes. What's up, guys? This is Mike Quintans with the Physical Therapy and Performance Podcast. I'm joined today with Chris Conlan. We're doing part 2. Fill me in, Coach. How you feeling? What's new?
I'm feeling great. Got a new daughter, 2 months old. Keeping me busy, so feeling good about that.
Congratulations, man. I'm thrilled for you.
Yeah, everything's going well.
All right, so part 1, we dove into COVID-19 and just some things that are unique about coaching styles today, and you in particular. I want to dive into a few different things today for part 2. So fill me in on AAU versus high school basketball. Recruiting now, like basketball is, I think, in my opinion, going to be the number 1 sport in the country, probably within the next 5 years. So you're right in the heart of it. We're outside Philadelphia. What other city has more recruits than Philly? I mean, I think we get a lot, big-time recruits. So fill me in. You're right in the heart of it. What are some of the challenges that you deal with as a public high school head coach and keeping kids within your district?
Yeah, so I think we are in the heart of it. Philly, has a great basketball reputation with, college NBA, just producing a lot of tough guys, tough players, and kind of has like an attitude to it and a culture to it. And in our area, there's a ton of competition. There's a lot of good high school basketball, and it's tough nowadays with private schools and Catholic schools. You're essentially trying to recruit your own kids to stay. For me, at a public school, obviously, I can't go outside of the Wallingford Swarthmore School District and recruit anyone to come. That would be illegal, and you have to live in the district. And I think that's tough for us. It kind of puts parameters on the kids that we can have on our team. And then you have these other schools, in the area that can recruit, and they can come and poach your guys at any moment. So I think the hardest thing for me is, we're constantly at 7th and 8th grade games, watching kids in our area, whether it's CYO or youth league or just middle school basketball, and then you're trying to talk to those kids and their parents and see where they're at and trying to keep them in the district at your school, and not going to one of these private schools. And the toughest thing is some of the private schools in the Interact Friends League, they can offer that extra year to reclassify, which any kid that can get an extra year of high school to play basketball or any sport for that matter. That's huge. I mean, that could be the difference between you going to, I think I said earlier, like maybe like a Villanova or like a Stony Brook, depending on your development and where you're at size-wise and things. So I think that's the biggest thing for us, is being able to try to keep our kids in our district and keep them at our school, as opposed to going to a private school or Catholic school.
So let me get this straight. You're doing extra work, and you wouldn't consider it work. I know you well enough, but you're doing extra work to keep kids in the district. And the other thing that kind of blew me away was that these kids can reclassify. Some of these student athletes can reclassify and go to a private school that's not PIAA, which is the organization, correct me if I'm wrong, of Pennsylvania athletics, right?
Yep.
But outside of PIAA are some of these private schools that can reclassify these students, and they can redo a year, essentially. So if they were a sophomore at Strath High School, they could then be a sophomore at one of these private schools and essentially get an extra year to develop, especially basketball.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best example, and again, we were talking about it a little bit ago, is for basketball is, a guy with size, an 8th or 9th grader that's maybe like 6'8", 6'9", 6'10", which obviously for basketball is great. There's not a lot of size. I mean, the biggest guy on my team last year was 6'3", 6'4". So, you essentially want to keep those kids, and other schools want those kids as well. And in 8th and 9th grade, most times 6'8", 6'9", 6'10" kid is just figuring out their body and getting coordinated. And, in basketball world, we call them raw, working on their skills. So that extra year for them, if you're a sophomore and you're just, 6'10", and you're, working on your skills and you're getting stronger and filling into your body, being able to be a sophomore again and get that extra year is huge down the road. And, again, building your strength and building your skills and working on your game to get where you want to go as far as college goes. But yeah, essentially they can reclassify for those private schools and get an extra year. The PIAA has kind of put in some transfer rules where, you're not eligible for the playoffs and things like that. But I think it's a problem, and I'll be honest, I think it goes to stems back to, a little bit of like the NBA. I mean, look at the NBA, you got guys that are all over the place. I mean, LeBron James has played for 3 different teams, and that's always debatable by everyone. But guys move and switch teams for whatever reason. They build these super teams, and, you're seeing that in high school basketball. You're seeing kids go to a high school to pair up with other great players in the area to make a, kind of like a superpower. And like I said, we don't have that luxury at Strath Haven. I'm not allowed to recruit, so we get the kids that we get and we work with them and we make them as good as we can. And I think, like I said, I think you see it in the NBA a little bit, and I think it's trickled down to kids just kind of switching schools. I mean, you've had seen kids be at 3 different high schools in 4 years, which is kind of insane. So
fascinating. My background's in football, and that's just another world to me. That kids are doing that, and that parents are putting their kids through that with the sole goal of getting a college scholarship, going to Villanova, as opposed to Stony Brook and the example that you gave. So dive into that piece. What is that like for the kid? If you can think of any examples, I mean, I'm sure we can imagine of how challenging that is, and at the next level, like to go through 3 high schools and then go to college. Yeah,
I mean, I think some of it's warranted. I mean, if things happen, things pop up, something happens at a school, for whatever reason, personal reasons, or, maybe you move, your family moves, to a new area, things like that. Things definitely pop up. But I think a lot of it you're seeing is, like I said, kids wanting to join, a superpower. I mean, one that comes off my head right now is like Roman Catholic in the city. Now they're PIAA, but they're like a powerhouse right now. I mean, they're bringing in kids and they're great. And I think that
I mean, what it comes down to is, what are the parents? How are the parents playing a role with this? And then and that's challenging, right? So like, how are the parents influencing the kids?
I mean, I think ultimately, getting on my other point with building super teams is, kids have falling outs with coaches. They don't like their coach, or they want to play for a different coach. And then ultimately in high school, parents, I mean, high school kids aren't really making decisions on their own. Their parents are kind of in charge of them, and, they're not even most of the time 18 yet. So parents sign off on all of that. And a lot of the times, I think that they, support their kids and going in those directions. And like I said, at the end of the day, they have to sign off on it. The kid just can't switch schools because they want to. So the parent has to kind of be on board with that. And a lot of it is recruiting. A lot of it is talking to other coaches, talking to, other kids that go to those schools and just, falling in love with the place and going there.
How is this affecting high school basketball?
I mean, I think that PIAA is trying to work on it, but it's just, I guess, for instance, I'll use the example for Strath Haven in the state playoffs this year. We played Archbishop Wood, who is Catholic school in the Catholic League and very, very good, very great coach. But they can recruit. We can't. I mean, their point guard just signed with UConn, and their whole starting 5 is looking at signing Division I, letters of intent at some point. And it's just tough because, those kids are from all over the area. They're not from, we get to pick from Wallingford, Swarthmore, that area there, and their kids, I think one of them is from New Jersey. So it's kind of just makes it tough. I don't want to say it's unfair, because I don't think it's unfair, but just the playing field just gets tougher when you're playing against a school like that, that can recruit, 7 guys that they want to play for them, as opposed to a school like Pencrest, Strath Haven, where you're picking from, a small area of Media or Wallingford.
Where are these kids getting? How are these kids getting recruited for Division I? So I don't know much about college basketball recruiting. So are a lot of these kids getting looked at from their AAU teams? Are they getting looked at through, is it highlight tapes that are going out? So how does it work?
I mean, I think, social media is huge. Obviously, there's, huddles still a thing, and you're sending highlight tapes out to colleges, and you got, Twitter where you can promote yourself. And, high school basketball obviously is a huge way to get recruited, but AAU is huge. I mean, there's different circuits for AAU, different tiers of teams, and, that's, how they get a lot of exposure. You're playing against the best competition most times in the country. So they travel around on these circuits, and, Under Armour has one, and they, college coaches galore at those events, man. They're just, sitting there watching every best player in the country and, picking what fits best for their college team. So, I mean, all three of those kind of intertwined, but I think AAU is huge. And then, high school obviously is big too, but the college coaches are more free to recruit at those AAU circuits sometimes, because obviously they're in season during basketball season. So they're not out as much.
So during AAU, that's out of season, so they're able to get to these tournaments and circuit games. That makes sense. What are your concerns with these athletes overtraining and injuries? What's your take on that?
I mean, I guess like the biggest concern is like you said, overtraining a little bit, overuse, I guess I'll say. Our season last year ended in March, and AAU picks up shortly after that in the spring and kind of goes a little bit through the summer. They start practicing and things like that. So you just worry about, overuse of certain, body parts, muscles, things like that, getting some flare-ups, because then that can lead to something more serious down the road. But I think the biggest thing for kids is knowing their bodies and knowing when to push, and it gets hard because, like we just said, with these AAU teams, I mean, you're playing essentially for a college scholarship most of the time. You're trying to show your best, show yourself in the best way possible at these tournaments, and sometimes, I know me as an athlete, I wasn't always forthcoming with injuries if it meant sitting out of a big game or, sitting out of an opportunity to get a college scholarship. Not that I ever had that opportunity, but I think it's tough on kids and it's tough on parents, because you want your kid to be in those games and you want them to have the best best chance possible to get that scholarship. So I think sometimes they might not be as forthcoming with, you know what, like at the end of the year, my hip was bothering me or my groin was bothering me. They might just keep rolling with it to keep going, and they might turn into something more serious down the road where they lose time, whether it's during the high school season or during the AAU season.
So what would you say to a parent or an athlete considering playing AAU basketball this off season?
I mean, like I said, I think as a kid or as a player, you just need to know your body. And, when I was playing, when I was younger, I wasn't as in tune to those things and tuned to all the like science behind injuries and stuff like that. And I feel like didn't know as much now. I think we were talking about how like Twitter and social media kind of helps people hear about certain things or be privy to certain things. But I think just knowing your body, and as a parent, just knowing, when your kid doesn't look right when they're playing. Hey, he doesn't look like he or she doesn't look like they're hobbled a little bit, and just kind of talking to them and having honest conversations, because the worst thing that can happen is getting a more serious injury down the road that makes you really lose serious time, an ACL or something like that, where you lose a couple months at a time, as opposed to maybe sitting out for a week or two to get back, get back in shape.
So you and I did something really unique this past season for you guys, and it was an honor to be a part of it and kind of put this proposal together for you. Obviously, we have a close relationship, so I pitched this idea to you about doing a screening for your athletes, and this was preseason at this point, and it was I think you guys had a scrimmage that day. You guys had like a practice, so we did like a 9-part screening, basketball-specific movements for the most part that could help to predict possible injuries. And so tell me about your experience with that and some of the outcomes that you saw, and I'd be more than happy to dive deeper into exactly what we did too.
Yeah, I mean, most of my injury prevention knowledge has come from you and come from, I think we were talking earlier about the Sixers and, Eagles having some guys that are injury prone, and just reading about what, articles come out about them and things that they're doing. So when you proposed that to me, I thought it was a great idea. Obviously, injuries can really derail a season. If a couple guys or a bunch of guys get injured, that can really hurt your team, and hurt those guys in particular. But when you came to me with the idea, I loved it. So, basically Mike came with his crew, and we got done was like an open gym. We got done scrimmaging, and actually while we were scrimmaging, they just took some guys, I think like 3 at a time, put them through some testing and videotaped them doing certain movements just to look for, and if I'm saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but look for some weakness in maybe, you know, certain areas, knees, ankles, hips, things like that, to try to attack with some stretches and some strengthening stuff to prevent an injury down the road. We actually had some guys at that point that had some, you know, some nicks, like I think one was like a tight hip, something like that, and a couple weak ankles. And, after that, Mike developed a plan individual for each kid, basically with his team, and they sent the app out to the players, and each thing was curtailed to that specific player, depending on where they saw some weakness in the video or where they saw some areas that they could strengthen or get more flexible. And from there, basically, those guys did a lot of that on their own, and then, you know, we would incorporate some stretching and stuff into our pre-practice routine, and just, you know, whatever we were working out. And we had 0 injuries throughout the year, literally 0 injuries. I'm not just saying that because he's my boy, but we had no injuries. And I think that speaks to our success last year as well. I mean, we were able to stay healthy and keep our core group together. But yeah, no injuries. And some of those things that were nagging certain guys, whether it was a hip, a groin, or an ankle, got stronger and got better. And you know, they didn't miss any time as far as practice or games go.
We spoke a decent amount during the season. I wish it was more. I just started opening up this office, and basketball season for you is nuts. So I want your take on how challenging it was to implement some of this for the kids. Was there resistance? And I want the athletes' take on it and the parents' take on it.
Yeah, so I think that overall the feedback was very positive. Every single parent, when I pitched it to them about you coming, was extremely excited about it and positive. I mean, any parent's worst nightmare is obviously their son or daughter getting injured. So if you can prevent that, and somebody, you know, that with your expertise is willing to come do it, that's huge. So the feedback for that was positive. And then the app, I mean, was amazing. The kids, everything was detailed for them on there, you know, step by step, whether it was a stretch or it was some sort of strengthening activity they needed to do, was very good details on there for them to do. I guess the hardest part is just not knowing. You know, obviously when I have the kids in front of me at practice or at a game, we can do what we can do as far as, you know, making them do a pregame stretch or a pregame warm up. But, you know, when they're on their own, just it's kind of their responsibility at home if something's bothering them to A, report it and like let us know, or B, do those stretches or do those strengthening exercises that you gave them. So I guess the hardest part is just not knowing like if they're actually doing it, and I guess I know that they did because we didn't really have any injuries, so that's good.
I think one of the most challenging things for any coach, and I've been fortunate enough to kind of be on both sides of it, having coached high school football, is that, all right, a kid's injured, or hurt, can he play through it? And then the communication with the trainer or whatever medical resources you have. And we've spoken ad nauseum about physicians and the team physician being involved, whether it's weekly appointments in the office or in the trainer's room with the kids or what have you. So tell me about the communication and then reading kids.
So for us at Strath, I mean, the communication with our trainer was great. I mean, he would, if someone, you know, went down at practice for some reason and he had to look at them for a second, he immediately came right over to me and let me know they're good to go. You know, this is what you need to do. So the communication with him is great. I will say, like, you know, we talked about in college, almost like every team kind of has their not own trainer, but, you know, there's one trainer for maybe 2 teams as opposed to the whole athletic department. Whereas in high school, you know, resources aren't as great. So there's one trainer for the whole high school. So, you know, when I would go up to the training room, the place is packed. So I think the amount of time that he gets to spend with each kid is tough on him, especially because it's like, all right, I got to get this kid in and see what he needs to do and tape his ankle or whatever, or, you know, do these stretches with him and then move him on and then the next kid. So I think, you know, there's a lot of kids coming through there, which can be tough sometimes. But at the end of the day, I think communication from the athletes is what's huge. And one thing I've noticed is you can always tell the kids that are doing what they're supposed to do because they're on time. They got there early. Then you got to see him and do it. And B, they're not getting injured and they're not staying injured if they are injured. So I think that's the hardest part is making sure that these guys, again, they're high school kids, but making sure that they're on time for their treatments, because he does have so many people. So them missing a treatment or being a couple minutes late is the difference between getting the treatment, not getting the treatment, or maybe not getting as much as they should.
I noticed that when I was coaching football, that we would communicate with the trainer, and he was like, "Oh, well, they didn't come in." I'm like, what do you mean they didn't come in? And then we would say, all right, well, then they can't practice. If they didn't see you, they can't practice. And it may be something as simple as like a concussion. They just had to give a letter to the trainer saying that they could, do to progress however they were supposed to at that point. And communication with the trainer was everything, because there were times the trainer maybe had gotten out late to practice, and that kid's on the field. And now we have to do something. We got to take the kid off the field.
Yeah.
And that can be a liability issue. So to me, like, communication's everything. I think the app is important. Tell me about sports medicine. I'm curious about your take on that, and how we should be making more of a difference. This has changed. The game has changed so much in terms of I don't even, who was our team physician in high school? For Pancras. I'm not even sure.
I can tell you.
Right. So I think that role is every player on your team could probably name who that doctor is. At Strath. So tell me about that role and how that could be best utilized. What is best practice, especially from a coach's perspective?
I just think that sports medicine is huge. When your expertise is something, certain, like, if you're a pediatrician, you kind of oversee everything, but someone that's specifically looking at sports injuries and looking at, sports movements and things like that, they have more experience, I think, with seeing A, the injury, and B, what needs to happen to make that injury better or to make it not get worse. And I think, like we just talked about, one of the things that's changed is when we were playing, I feel like you had like an ache or a pain and you kind of just played, or some kids just didn't. Some kids said it hurt and they couldn't, and other kids kept going. And I think we just know so much more. I think some of those aches and pains that we had turned into like torn ACLs and turned into like, sports hernias and things like that, back issues, whatever it may be. Whereas I think we know more about how certain things work. And again, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just kind of going off of my knowledge of it from coaching. We just know more how things work. Like, oh, your calf's tight. Like 2 days later, you might pop your Achilles because there's something going on down there, or your quadriceps tight, and you think you just got and then 2 days later you tear your ACL because that part of your leg was weak and something else tried to compensate for that. So I think we just know more about, from my experience, we just know more about those little tweaks and how they can get more serious, and we need to take care of those. And that's what I kind of try to stress with my guys is like, hey, if you're injured, it doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to play. It just means that you might need to do this, A, B, and C to make yourself stronger when you play. And I always told them the trainer's the guy. Like, I'm not able to let you play if he tells me no. So if you're not doing what he says, then you're not going to be able to play. Like, that's it. Like, I can't help you in that situation. So I just try to enforce it. Like, trainer's huge. Doing your stretches is huge. Showing up for your treatment is huge, because those little tweaks can then turn into something more serious.
I did everything I could in high school to avoid the trainer. I mean, I feel like I made that known. Like, I did not want to see the trainer, and Sue was amazing. I mean, Sue Moffitt over, she's at Williamson now. She's aces. Probably one of the best trainers I know. She's excellent.
Yeah, so when I broke my foot my senior year in high school, I wasn't supposed to be able to play the whole basketball season, and she demanded that the doctor put me in a boot because she could give me some sort of physical therapy while I was in the boot to make it quicker when I came back to be able to play. And I wasn't supposed to play. And she had me back on the court pretty early and pretty healthy. So
Sue Moffitt getting a shout out.
She's awesome.
That's awesome.
She's awesome.
So the way it should work, let's talk about this best practice. In my opinion, I want to hear your perspective on this. The head coach needs to be in the loop. They need to be educated on how what an athlete is able to do and how they should do it. What are the limitations and what are the parameters in which that athlete can perform, participate. That comes from, in my opinion, from the athletic trainer, the ATC, to the coach, because that ATC is coming in direct contact with the athlete. The other role in this whole thing, obviously the ATC, they're pretty much overseeing the rehab if that's happening in their office and not somewhere else, and their performance and what they can tolerate going back, so they can communicate that to the coach. The other piece of this whole thing is the sports med doc, the physician, the team physician. His role, in my opinion, or her role, in my opinion, is to direct care accordingly, meaning is how serious is the injury? What do we need to do to confirm the injury diagnosis, right? And then what is the plan of action? The ATC then carries out, or PT, whoever's involved, then carries out and executes that plan of action to make sure that they're ready to perform. That's what needs to happen. If any of those links are weak, right? Like the physician may say, this requires a surgical consult, or maybe they need to see a neurologist or whatever else. But they determine what treatment is indicated, and then it's executed, and then it goes back to the ATC to make sure it's all coming back together so they can get ready to perform. If any of those links are weak, I think the whole thing crumbles. If a parent gets involved and says, my son or daughter is not going to see that's the team physician, they're going to go to urgent care instead. Now the ATC's handcuffed because he can only practice within the surgeon or the doctor or whoever, physician assistant, whoever saw them at urgent care. Whatever decision they made is now the decision that the ATC has to live by. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree about, the chain of command there. I haven't had any issues with like a parent taking it, like most of all of our parents pretty much trusted the trainer and their team physician there. Or, the trainer tells you or physician tells you to go to a certain doctor, whatever it may be, and they do that. But I just think high school wise, like resources wise, it gets tough because there's not as much access to, the team doctor all the time. The team doctor, it's not, like the professionals where the team doctor's sitting on the end of the bench. It's, if one of my kids gets injured in a game, he might not see the team doctor for a week, depending on how serious it is. The trainer obviously is there, and the trainer does what they can do, and then they figure it out, and they can kind of try to diagnose an injury, but the doctor's the main one. And I think we don't see them enough, and, by no fault of their own, it's just kind of how it is. And high school level, there's not enough, resources for every school to hire a team doctor to be at every sporting event. And then, like I said, the trainers are stretched a little thin. There's crazy, during the fall, there's a lot of sports going on. There's field hockey, girls soccer, boys soccer, football, volleyball. I think that's it. Golf. There's a ton of sports going on, so they're stretched in different directions. When we go to an away game, they give me a med kit and say, here, like, there's tape in there. There's, stuff for the other trainer obviously to use, but that trainer doesn't know my kids at all. So that, it's kind of what we're dealing with. And it would be great if we could have that chain of command all the time. Like you said, a doctor, diagnosing and then giving a plan of action and a trainer following through with it. But most time it's like a trainer kind of doing all three jobs essentially.
Sure.
Until the doctor's available.
Yeah, you're being pretty. That's reality right there, and that's it. And I think people need to hear that. Insurance.
Insurance is huge.
Role with that.
Yeah, insurance is huge.
Who can that kid see? I know where I coached that before. Unfortunately, that was challenging for the trainer. Well, their insurance won't allow them. I know it won't allow them to see so and so, and that's the team doc or what have you. And so they would say, okay, so it only costs $20 to go to urgent care. That's where they're going to go. And they get poorly diagnosed, or maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong.
I mean, this is one of the craziest things, like physicals. So like physicals, there's like a day in the summer where they're like, Dr. So-and-so is going to be at the high school from 9 to 4, come get your physical, like walk in. And then like in the winter, they might do like another one maybe, or in like November before basketball. But, it's kind of like.
How many kids show up the first day of camp without physicals?
Last year I had none.
That's because you coach.
At Pencrest, we had one time we had one, and it was like a very significant player, and it was Coach Doyle was upset. But, again, it's there's a lot that goes into it, insurance-wise and things like that. And, some people, don't want to communicate that, which is fine. It's within their rights. But it gets hard when all that stuff's involved. There's a lot of moving parts, and sometimes with injuries in high school, in my opinion, there's too many cooks in the kitchen. Like, there needs to be, the doctor, the trainer, and instead of like, oh, this doctor diagnosed it this, but now I'm going here. And a second opinion's great, but sometimes you're getting like the third opinions, and it's like, all right, sometimes people are just going to tell you what you want to hear occasionally. Well,
and that's got to be tough for you because obviously you want to hear that the student athlete's healthy and can compete.
Exactly.
And they're getting a letter from maybe someone that you're unfamiliar with and not the team physician, and the trainer goes, I don't know what to tell you, they were cleared.
Yeah, and we talked about it in part one, like trust that goes with like the trainer too. Like I trust that he's going to do what he needs to do, and he's going to get them back on the court or field as soon as he can. Like, he's not, he doesn't have a vendetta for anyone. He likes Strath Haven sports just as much as I do and wants to see us be successful. So, I mean, he wants to get them back on the court as safely and as quickly as possible. So I think just trusting, my thing is when a kid gets injured, I'm just kind of like, all right, like, you're with the trainer. Like, I don't really need to see you until you can play. Obviously, there's certain situations where they come out and maybe watch a part of practice if it's not a serious injury where they're going to be playing the next day or playing and they need to watch something that we're doing. Yeah, that's fine. But like, I essentially will, like, hey, go get better, go get right, and come back, and we need you on the court.
You're letting everyone do their job.
Essentially, yeah. I mean, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not even close to a doctor, so like, I'm not diagnosing any injuries.
I think the more, and this isn't easy to do because of time, you have to communicate, right? Whether it's, I know in my role, I've had athletes, plenty of athletes that come in here that are in season. I have to communicate to the athletic trainer and to the coach even. Phone call to the coach and to the athletic trainer. I have to keep the ATC in the loop, as well as a physician, because a physician offers final clearance. And there's times the physician is responded back to me, hey, up to you. You clear them. If they're cleared, if you think they're cleared, they're cleared. And I'll have to communicate that, along the chain to make sure everyone's in the loop. And that comes back to trust. I mean,
and it puts you guys in a tough spot with pressure as well, because I mean, like we talked about at the beginning of this, there's kids that were trying to play for college scholarships that are, trying to get free college. And when, unfortunately in our world, when money's involved, things get, pushed aside every now and then. So you got some kids that might rush back, or, hopefully, and this doesn't happen that much, but parents that are trying to rush you to clear a kid because, hey, we're playing, there's a big game tomorrow, Friday night, he needs to be playing. I mean, I think this is one of the movies we grew up watching, but Friday Night Lights. I mean, the guy has a torn ACL. The doctor tells him that. It's not what he wanted to hear. He goes out and plays, and he ruins himself, and he never really plays football again. Now, that's a movie, but, it's kind of reality sometimes with people rushing because they want to get the results that they think they deserve.
I think it's cool to hear your perspective on what athletes are dealing with. What else do you have to share about that? Are there any insight on what athletes deal with day to day, whether it's student athletes in particular, in terms of academics, balancing that and going to the right school so they can get into the right college and get the scholarship and so forth? Yeah,
I mean, obviously, we've been talking a lot about the actual sports and the injuries and things like that, but even college, high school and college, you're a student athlete and then think, Strath Haven's a great high school. I think it was ranked one of the top 5 high schools in the country. So those kids are getting a great education. And one of the biggest things that we as coaches try to portray to them is you can be the greatest basketball player, but if your grades aren't good, you ain't going anywhere. The first question that I get asked every single email, phone call, face-to-face visit, which hasn't happened recently, but because of COVID, but like, the first question the college coach asked me, what's his grades like? They don't even ask me about basketball. What kind of kid is he? How's his family? What are his grades?
Wow.
Boom, boom, boom. And then it's like, oh, okay. And then you either hear from him again or you don't. And if the grades aren't good, I can tell you, usually don't hear from him again. So we try to stress to our guys, like, you got to do well in the classroom. And if you're communication, again, if you're having trouble, let us know. I'm a teacher. 2 of the other coaches are teachers. Let us know, and let your own teachers know. I mean, they want to help you. They want to make you be successful. So we always just try to stress that. Student athlete first. You got to get the grades.
There's a lot of distractions. I mean,
tons of distractions.
And it was when we were younger too, but now more than ever, I think there's a lot of challenges with that, and a lot of external influence on some of that too. So that's awesome. This has been a really cool podcast. We talked a little bit about injuries, AAU. We dove deep into AAU and what's going on, at least in southeastern PA, with recruiting. I'm sure this is happening nationally too. That's a new world to me, and how much that's changed even over the last 10 years. I don't remember AAU when we were in high school, 15, 20 years ago. So this has been pretty cool. Chris, how can our listeners get in contact with you?
On Twitter and Instagram, just at Coach_Conlan, CONLAN.
Chris, thanks, man. This is awesome.
Appreciate it, Mike.
All right, man. Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening to the On Cue Performance Therapy Podcast. If you like this episode, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It would mean so much to me if you could leave us a 5-star review so more listeners like you could get this important information. See you next time.